All right, can everyone see my screen? Alrighty, thank you. Oh, so already, what is going on here? Okay. Alrighty. Sorry, I'm still accepting some people from the wait room. Alrighty. Alrighty, thanks everyone for joining the Hill CDC bi-monthly Hill District Plans meeting. So today we are going to cover a lot. We have the Hill CDC updates. We will receive updates from Freedom Corner. As you all know, that there was an accident there during the summertime. So we've been working with other stakeholders to fix that issue. We will also hear from Alcosan, Bedford Dwellings Choice Neighborhood implementation about housing strategies, types of housing, and community feedback. We'll also hear from Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy on the Hill District Parks Master Plan, and then we'll hear from Community Leaps, which is Local Energy Action Program Power. And so just some brief introductions. The Hill CDC, Marimba Malines, the president and CEO. My name is Chavesha Cheney, the Policy and Programs Associate. And here at the Hill CDC is a place-based organization focused on equitable redevelopment and revitalization in the Hill District. We're a cultural legacy meets future innovation, and we are celebrating 34 years of operation. So a little bit of our mission, about our mission. The Hill CDC works in partnership with residents and stakeholders to create, promote, and implement strategies and programs that connect plans, policy, and people to drive compelling community development opportunities in the Greater Hill District. Our focus area is people, of course, the place, the Hill District, and making sure that we are advocating for equitable development. So a little bit about the areas that Hill CDC focus on. We have our real estate development, which a lot of people see in our Center Avenue corridor or commercial core and home ownership. Economic development programs. So we have business and entrepreneurship programs, home ownership preparation, and arts and culture. And then we have policy and planning, which again, promotion of equitable development and neighborhood planning. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to discuss the Lower Hill preliminary land development plan. That's a tongue twister. So what is the preliminary land development plan? A preliminary land development plan is a master plan for specially planned districts and includes details for infrastructure, development patterns, landscape design, and architectural details, and is accompanied by zoning text that is specific to the specifically planned district. And so where can I find the plan? The former Laurel Hills PODP and other Lower Hill planning documents can be found at www.pittsburgh.gov/DCP dash 1H dash SPD. I can also drop this link in the chat, and we can also drop it in the chat on Facebook. And so here is where I am going to pass it over to our President and CEO, Marimba Malines, who's going to dive deeper into the preliminary land development plan.
Thank you, Chavasia, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Again, I'm Marimba Malines, President and CEO of the Hill Community Development Corporation. And as Chavasia was mentioning, this is an illustrative Lower Hill plan. Meaning that it is not exact. And in fact, this particular plan is being updated, as you will hear very shortly. Also, I should note that this is the Lower Hill Development project. And so this is technically their information, but we thought it was really important to share with you because they have requested a briefing in November with city planning, and this is a very important project for the neighborhood. So with that said, let's dive in a bit. Next slide. This gives you a bird's eye view of the plan that is being proposed. I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison. Again, these are the Lower Hill Development Team's slides or images, I should say, but we will walk you through largely what we understand. And so just as a reference point, you have probably the most familiar building that you'll see on the site is the FMB Tower building, which is the bottom left corner. Chavasia, if you could point to that. I don't think I can move the mouse over to the right here. It's kind of tricky, up a little, and it's let me see if I can grab the pointer from you 1 second. All right, can you see my mouse now? All right, good. All right, so here is the FMB Tower where it's being constructed, at least. And you will also note that this is the Block E section here. This is where the current music and entertainment venue is being proposed with a 908 parking space garage. All right, I won't go through every single block because we're not necessarily talking about the development tonight. We're really talking about the preliminary land development plan, as this is the Hill District Plans update meeting. Sorry, I have a little delay on my side. All right, so the first thing that you'll see here are a comparison between what the plan was in 2014 and what the plan is being proposed as of essentially right now. As I mentioned, there's a request to stand before the Planning Commission in November. I don't know if that's been confirmed. I'll request City Planning to give us an update on that date. But on the left, you'll notice that this particular site, this section is about the blocks. And so when we talk about a block, we're talking about these yellow sections and these green sections. And you'll see that the blocks have been reconfigured. So on the left, you have, one consolidated block in that bottom, I guess that's the left if you're looking at the screen, and then top left if you're looking at the screen, and then the bottom, you have both a green space as well as the development proposed here. And then as you move up the block, excuse me, I should say, as you move up the block, you have just whole blocks, right? And then you see a street here, a kind of a cul-de-sac of sorts. But then when you move to the new proposed plan, you see a reconfiguration of the green space proposed, as well as an elimination of some of the streets. And so you see that this street was eliminated. You see that this kind of roundabout of sorts was eliminated, or cul-de-sac was eliminated. And you also see that there was some consolidation of Block B and A. You see the green space was moved up to Crawford and Wiley Avenue, as opposed to kind of sitting down at the intersection in the middle of the site. And then you see a lot of green space introduced in the bottom middle of the triangle here, And so this is a reconfiguration of the green space. That'll be a little more clear perhaps in future slides, but I think that's important to note that while there are some requirements for a certain amount of green space, where the green space is being proposed, the one that I do want to call out is that this one at Wiley and Crawford Street is related to a proposed move of the curtain call, which is a sustainability project that the community had previously decided should be in front of the PPG Paints Arena. The Penns and the Lower Hill Development Team would like to move it from the prior agreed location of in front of PPG Paints Arena to Wiley and Center. Wiley and Crawford. So this is very important because they are requesting that the fundamental plan be changed while still we are waiting to get some feedback from them on whether or not the community will have input on that specific request. This next section is about streets and pedestrian connections. So you can see this is probably the most major change, an elimination of Wiley Avenue that goes all the way down to the bottom of the site. I think that this is really important because our master plan specifically calls to take Wiley Avenue, to reconnect Wiley Avenue back to downtown. And while we know that's not technically possible just because of the CAP project that has happened where there's a park, the Frankie Pace Park, done by the SEA, the Sports and Exhibition Authority, it is important to note that that change has occurred. And so there will no longer, in their proposed changes, have a street going from the lower half of the site to the very bottom of the site, okay? Some other things that are of note are proposed changes to the pedestrian kind of pathway, so to speak. So you'll see here, it kind of like makes an L shape and goes off. And then you see here, it kind of goes all the way through the new consolidated blocks that are being proposed. Again, you see the elimination of the street, noting that, but these are the streets and pedestrian connection revisions that they are looking to make. The open space and courtyards, I just talked a lot about that. This is section 2.6. The preliminary land development plan does require a certain amount of green space, or the city requires a certain amount of green space on any site of this scale. And so, this is the proposed green space for this particular site. So I won't, again, go all the way back through the entire plan, but I do think that it's important to note that, all of the green spaces have shifted to some degree. And then another thing that I think is important is that this area here is being proposed to change to a sub-district in the actual changes. So if you can see my mouse, this area here in the previous plan was not noted as such. So that would be a requested change. You'll also note that there's a proposed change of green space from 2.96 acres of land to 3.83 acres of green space and courtyards. All right, so going a little further into the green space and courtyards. The timing is related to the development progress. According to this plan, they are proposing 2 phases to complete accessible pathway from Washington to Logan. And this is very important because this came up as an issue for the City Planning Commission when they got Block G1 approved. Frankly, there were some changes that needed to be made prior to Block G1 being approved, but the Planning Commission conditioned that the developers come back with any changes prior to bringing any future development, which is why you're seeing the changes now before the Block E site where the entertainment venue and structured parking is proposed. That's why you see the changes coming now. Okay, so they're proposing a phase 2 of 0.44, and so phase 2 would be, F2 would be a phase 1. Okay, open spaces and courtyards. And then F2 phase 2 would be, I'm sorry, one second. I think I got F, oh yeah, so you have the 2 different areas. So you have the 0.86 in red, and then you have the 0.44 in 44 in gold. Okay, and then also you have G4, which is 0.67 totaling 1.97 acres of space in this particular proposal. So G4 is a brand new block that didn't exist in the original plan, and it is adjacent to the FMB Tower. Okay, and here you just have parking and service. These are parking and service entries and proposals. Again, noting the pathways that are here, the elimination of the streets. You will note some new curb cuts here also in this portion of the plan, but this is largely to ensure the parking and service for the site. Okay, so a little bit of background about the PLDP so that everyone is aware. The Hill CDC facilitated all of the early stages of community conversations regarding the PLDP. This was back in 2011 and 2012, as early as excuse me, I'm sorry, my slide changed on me. I think I have a pause here, so just give me 1 second. There we go. Chavisha, I am going to turn off, I'm going to give you the remote because I think I have a delay. So I'll just let you know when to move to the next slide. So as I was mentioning, as early as 2012, conversations were held and extensive community engagement took place. The Hill CDC staffed and facilitated an entire preliminary land development plan and street grid committee and held extremely large community meetings over months. Hundreds of residents participated in those conversations because we understood the preliminary land development plan was essentially the master plan for the Lower Hill and could essentially empower the community to have long-term outcomes that would benefit the entire community. So move to the next slide, please. I want to once again thank all of the members of the community who participated, all of those who did. I'm sure remember the hours, the countless hours we spent. On behalf of these committees, the Hill CDC issued an extensive memo to the Penguins outlining the community's desire for the preliminary land development plan prior to issuance of the plan back in 2014. This is very important because there were a number of items in that memo that remain outstanding, and we'd like to revisit those in this particular version of the preliminary land development plan. One of the chief concerns was that there was a lot of pushback on whether or not the City Planning Commission should be reviewing things like the community benefits agreement as they are reviewing forthcoming development. And so we just remind everyone that one of the primary roles of the City Planning Commission is to ensure positive socioeconomic impact, protection of the environment, and protection of the public good and interests. And so that language is very clearly spelled out in city and zoning code. And it's also explicitly called out in the review criteria for the preliminary land development plan for the Planning Commission. And so, in the code for preliminary land development plans for the City Planning Commission to follow. And so we really encourage the City Planning Commission and all public agencies to not forget the socio and socioeconomic. We oftentimes, and not forget the public good in this particular project. It is critically important to remember that this project will have a long-term impact on the entire Hill District and frankly, the entire city. And so there are a few things we'd like to see moving forward. Next. One is that the preliminary land development plan committee requested stronger language throughout the preliminary land development plan referencing the community benefits agreement, which we call the CCIP, the Community Collaboration and Implementation Plan. Now, what is the CCIP? The CCIP is a document signed between the Hill District community and the Pittsburgh Penguins, the city of Pittsburgh, the county, and the intent of that is to ensure 7 focus areas that protect the long-term interests of the Hill District neighborhood, which is a historic community. So in order to do that, we wanted to formally attach our community benefits agreement called the CCIP to ensure that the City Planning Commission could use it at the highest level possible to protect a vulnerable community and to promote equity. And so we continue to ask the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Lower Hill Development Team to ensure that that the CSIP and community benefits agreement are attached to the revised PLDP. On October 14th, the Lower Hill Executive Management Committee voted to support this request. And in upcoming revisions, we are asking for the mayor, the city planning commission to fully support the executive management committee, the Hill CDC, and a broader range of other community members who would like to ensure additional protections. So additional requests that are forthcoming to the developer, in fact, they received these on October 17th, is to hold a community charrette with the Hill CDC and the Development Review Panel and other RCO groups to ensure support of moving the curtain call. There have been no discussions to date. And as I mentioned, the curtain call is a sustainability project that happens to be beautiful. It is not an art project as much as it is a sustainability project, right? And so sometimes we are getting caught up on the fact that it is absolutely gorgeous. It was done in collaboration with and led by Walter Hood, who is one of America's greatest landscape architects. And he is an African-American who is esteemed throughout the world for his incredible work. And so I know he has been engaged to a degree on the new location, but the community hasn't been engaged on this proposed new location. Meanwhile, the PLDP would be changed to really accommodate that change. So there are some things that are slightly out of order in terms of those community conversations. So I'm really looking for the Lower Hill development team to deliver on that request. Also, we'd like for them to, we'd like to be ensured that that there are updated traffic and environmental studies to determine the impact of the changes that we know to date. It's very important. The Hill District community experiences a lot of congestion, and a parking garage, quite frankly, introduces new environmental issues that need to be studied. And although we're not talking specifically about Block E on this site, we're talking about the whole master plan for this meeting, but for the next proposed development with a 908 parking garage, we definitely want to see some environmental studies with the proposed changes. We also would like to see inclusion of, or I should say, see them incorporate inclusionary zoning for affordable housing and minority business inclusion. This is, an opportunity for us to, increase the affordable housing on the site, to have that as a part of the master plan for the site. And we also would like to push the boundaries around innovation and make sure that there's also affordable commercial space. We weren't successful in securing affordable commercial space for Block G1, which is unfortunate because you can see how large scale that project is, but we would like to see that incorporated in the master plan so that we're not dealing with a block by block strategy in negotiating community benefits. One idea that the Hill CDC is introducing is that the Hill District community is involved, and you'll hear more about this later, in a choice process to bring about 800 new units of affordable housing to the Hill District. The Lower Hill District is within the boundaries of the choice planning area. This would be approximately a $50 million grant that would come from HUD that has to be matched multiple times over to incorporate or to do a development of about 800 units of affordable and mixed income housing. The area that is being redeveloped is Bedford Dwellings, if the HUD funds come, and there are also some proposals on Heron Avenue. The Hill CDC has been really focused on ensuring that if there are opportunities to leverage that funding and or that opportunity for the Lower Hill, we'd like to see that as well. We'd like for the Lower Hill development team to reevaluate maximum building heights. So you all probably have noticed how tall the current structure in Block G1 is going to be. And sometimes it's really hard to envision what a development will look like until it's happening. And so now that we see the scale and size of the Block G1 development, we also can revisit our early request of reevaluating maximum building heights, because quite frankly, we wouldn't want to see a building cover up St. Benedict the Moor. That's an iconic figure in the Hill District and in the city. And there are a lot of other things that should be considered relative to maximum building height. So remember, there are the minimums and the maximums in the PLDP. Excuse me. And finally, any changes should not conflict with other community commitments, such as those that were publicly announced by the Penns in their discussions with Bethel AME. So that's a much bigger conversation. But the long and short of it is there have been a lot of commitments made to different community groups and different community interests. And what we're saying is that if there are outstanding commitments and open issues with community members, that the changes that are being proposed to the preliminary land development plan should not foreclose on those commitments, such that a community group would not be aware that what has been committed is no longer possible because the land use plan has been changed. Next, Javesha. The bottom line for us is that we want to see the CSIP follow. We want to make sure that the PLD supports community goals with the additional revisions that we are talking about here. And we obviously want to see the CSIP to be connected and attached formally at the highest level possible for the City Planning Commission to be able to use that document as a review tool as they evaluate future plans. So I want to be really technical here that the proper language is not kind of a reference document, because you can reference a marketing study, right? We want this to be formally attached and or whatever language we need to utilize to get that maximum ability for city planning to review and use the city planning, the community collaboration and implementation plan for its review of future developments on the Lower Hill. Next slide. This is just the signature page for anyone who's interested. And we never miss an opportunity because it's very important to remember that the Lower Hill land will be sold for $10 per tract. And so, you know, we think that this is a really important equity issue. We know that this particular meeting is more about planning, not development, but we'd like to keep this issue in front of people because in the Middle Hill District and other parts of the Hill District, parcels are being sold for $20,000 and more to minority businesses, to nonprofits. In the Lower Hill District, that land is being sold for $10 per tract. And so we just think it's really important for people to remember the deep inequity that exists and how much further we think that the development team can come to meet the community around these equity issues relative to the PLDP and future development. Next. All right, I'm going to cover these and then we're going to pass it over to the next presenter. So the Hill CDC has been working for many, many years to build a Black commercial, cultural, and innovation corridor. Next slide. We were fortunate to have received a grant from the Pittsburgh Foundation to bring on Yancey Consulting. This is Lisa Yancey on the right and her team members, some of her team members who are helping to work with us. Lisa is a nationally regarded, actually, I think she's internationally regarded cultural planning consultant. And so we are on our way, we're doing some development, and that's really important. The brick and mortar is critically important because the brick and mortar is what where activity happens oftentimes, but there are other things that can happen in the meantime. And as development comes online, we want to make sure that those buildings are activated in a way that really honor the African-American cultural legacy, which is our master plan's charge to the Hill District community. And so she is helping us to come up with a plan to ensure that programmatically we address and fulfill our vision of a Black commercial, cultural, and innovation corridor. Next slide. These are just a few pictures. We are having many, many meetings, micro meetings, individual one-on-ones. You may get a call if you live in the Hill District. Our next slide will, show you where you can actually log on to register to have an interview. But this was just one of our many meetings that we're having. We do like to have a more intimate setting so that everyone has an opportunity to give their thoughts and contribute. Next. This is just a little more about the project. They are a trusted partner. I've already talked to you about that. They plan to collect a full spectrum of ideas to reflect some of the low and no budget ways that we can begin to activate the corridor for longer term returns. An example is the rich and deep history of the Hill District is a source of pride for many with roots in the community. Making this history and pride visible through physical markers and opportunities for celebration can start to change the perception of the Hill District. We love the Hill District, but there are a lot of you, all you have to do is go to some of our local newspaper comments and see some of the perceptions that really oftentimes poorly represent what the Hill District is really about. So anyway, much more to come. Again, here's the link if you're interested. We can paste this link in the chat, or we can send it out to anyone who requests. And we will also make sure that it's on our website in a place where you can find it. Next slide. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Malcolm Harvey, who is here to present to you about the work that has been happening at the city level, also with the Hill CDC, and some other community partners and stakeholders to ensure that the Freedom Corner monument is restored. I'm sorry, I think I said Malcolm Harvey. I did not mean to say that. I apologize. I meant, let me let him introduce himself.
Okay. I like that name. I like that name.
I'm sorry about that.
That's fine. I'm in my car and I stopped to do this.
Okay.
So could you, there's a slide up? Were you able to look at the slide?
Yes. Harvey,
Okay,
give me
Sure.
1 second before we dive into you, because I know Marimba threw a lot of information out. So I just wanted
Sure.
to ask if anyone had any questions. Please feel free to take yourself off mute or drop any questions in the chat on the Zoom platform or on the Facebook platform, and we'll make sure that they get answered. But I did want to give people a chance to come off mute and ask any questions on what has been presented so far.
Thank you, Tre'Vaysha. Good call.
All right. If we don't, someone. That's Harvey. All right. If we don't have any questions, then Harvey, I'm on the first slide that is showing Freedom Corner.
Okay, so this is a photograph actually I did after the first renovation that was back in 2015. It was $200,000 worth of work that we did. Pretty much you showed the pristine condition that it was. We had new lights, the bollards, we evened out the concrete, the drains were working properly. And I believe the signage on the left-hand side that was there, I can't find now, but that was there as well. Next slide. I'm brief, so to the point. This was Freedom Corner shot in early August. It was right after the accident. There was an accident, an automobile accident around the 29th of July. Pretty much they damaged the granite and actually may have compromised the structure underneath, but there are other things that were wrong with the site as well, like the drainage and the granite along the sides were fading away or deteriorating. Looks pretty bad. Next slide. This is a close-up. I like how you blocked out that sign. This is a close-up of the damaged. We have problems now where people are actually coming up and touching the granite. Somebody's pulled this one granite piece down, and it's getting worse as time goes on. So there was urgency to get some type of protection around the site, which we just established within the last week. We actually got the letter of authorization to start work about 2 or 3 days ago. Next slide. This is an aerial view. Same problem. You see the problem with drainage and some of the standing in the back, as well as the condition of the sidewalk on the left-hand side, which is actually a tripping hazard. We're going to make an attempt to deal with the tripping hazard first before the other issues are solved. The other problem we have now is that for us to order the granite, there's a 6-month lead time between the time we actually order, between the time we actually order the granite and delivery. So that's what we're working with right now. Next slide. This is showing the proposed area for the fencing. We'll also put signage up to show what's coming up. I have to go over that with the Art Commission to see that it's pretty much standard and shows pretty much what's going on. We will also be doing an Engage page to show the progress of this project and proposals. We also are looking for community input for a design or work on the kiosk on the other side, because that should be a part of this project. That actually is a part of this project, to update the kiosk. Next slide. This again shows the condition of the sidewalk. Next slide. Same thing. We're going to try to deal with this granite that's breaking away, perhaps extend the sidewalk into this area. But again, that's for community input, which we'll be having in the upcoming months. We pretty much have 2 months to have the community input before we come to a final design. But in the meantime, we will put something there to prevent tripping hazard. Next slide. This starts to show proposals for seating. There was an issue with seating. There was a lot of seating that's proposed in the original design. I believe that's in the next slide, but we were gonna put we had proposed, or the idea was to put seating where the metal kiosk is now, and then seating along the northeastern wall, which is leading up to the monument itself. We are looking for input to see if that's enough seating. I believe we also had a discussion about putting temporary seating in for large groups, because many senior citizens come here and it's an issue with seating. I'm also showing on the left side the new concrete, so to speak, textured concrete we'll have where the granite meets the sidewalk, where we're having problems with it breaking away. Next slide. This shows the condition after the accident. You see some of the granite shifted. You may or may not see that. The kiosk was pretty much old technology. It hasn't been, well, I don't know if it ever worked, but the idea was back, I believe it was 2000. So the small monitor upkeep just doesn't really work. So we're proposing doing the information. The idea is to do the information for the website with a QR code, to have this posted somewhere on this area. Within the center, we're proposing, the idea is to put seating. And again, that's open for public opinion and input. Next slide. This shows one of the drawings done by Mr. Graves, who was the architect of the proposed seating back before the construction, and just showing the amount of seating that was on the table. I just found out recently the reason why it did not happen was lack of funds. So this does show that the seating was thought about, and I'd like to try to introduce that back into this project. Next slide. This is just for the Art Commission. I'm working with trying to get ideas. This is one of the first proposals for seating in the kiosk area, pretty much granite seating down there. Well, remove the metal and put in granite backing to make it look homogeneous, pretty, whatever, but just an upgrade, hopefully. But it's just an idea. Again, it's open for public opinion. Next slide. And this is the north east wall, the entrance to the monument. Again, I'm proposing seating along this wall as well. It's about 15, probably 20, 25 feet of area of seating, linear feet. Perhaps we need more, but we'll look into that. And again, that's for public input and for the design process. Next slide. This is pretty much just an itemized items that we were looking at as far as place of granite panels, kiosks. There was planning that was not at CUP. There used to be burning bush in front that didn't survive. I think it's been gone for 2 years now in front of the sign. There's an issue of water collecting on the site. We were talking about, I believe, just better management as far as washing it away and brushing it away. We'd also proposed opening up the drains more, having a wider inlet, but that comes with its own problems. But we'll look at that with design. Sidewalk issue. and the granite along the sidewalk, which will probably be dealt with the new sidewalk. Next slide. We see here again, the light bollards was another issue. There was a thought where we might put more substantial bollards up for protection in case somebody wants to, car proof. That's open for opinion. That means we get away from the lighted bollards that we have now, but the one bollard that was damaged was actually repaired by DPW, and we're just waiting to install that one. That's open for public opinion as well. Next slide. And that's the end of the presentation. The cost to do this, the initial phase of this is about 25 grand. It's pretty much a 50% of the cost of the stone, as well as the fencing and other work that the contractor, who's Graciano, will be doing on this to shore up the site. So while we wait for the stone to be delivered, so it's more secure and it doesn't get into any worse condition. That's it.
Thank you, Harvey. Did anyone have any questions?
I just want to take a moment to thank Harvey. He has been exceptional at supporting the councilman's office, the Hill CDC, a group of stakeholders focused on the renovation and repair of Freedom Corner. So we just appreciate your dedication. This is so very important. And we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any questions online and I don't see any in the chat, so we are going to keep it moving with our next presentation by Alcosan. I don't see, oh, yep, I see her, Alexis.
Actually, Joey Valerian from Alcosan will be doing the presentation.
Okay, I didn't even see him there, thank you.
I am here. I'm sorry. I am here.
No, you're fine. Alrighty, give me
So
one
do you like me
second.
to share my screen or are you gonna advance this here?
Nope, I'll control the screen and then you just tell me when to go next to the next slide.
Okay, go right ahead. So thanks everybody. I'm Joey Valerian. I am the Director of Communications for the Allegheny County Sanitary Authority, or otherwise known as Alcosan. For those of you who don't know us or don't know what we do, basically, anytime you flush your commode, wash your dishes, wash your hands, that dirty water eventually makes it to this plant that you see here on the north side for treatment, and then it's put back into the Ohio River. We are on 59 acres on the north side. We're on a small area right now. We do run 24/7, 365. We're just like any other utility in that method. And most importantly, I think a lot of people do not realize, being an authority, we are completely funded by all of us who pay an Alcosan bill. So we are completely ratepayer funded. Next slide, please, ma'am. So just briefly, the black outline with the kind of off yellow colors, whoops. Is our service territory. So we cover most of Allegheny County, 83 communities, including the city of Pittsburgh. City of Pittsburgh obviously being our largest customer. What's interesting about this map is those red lines that you see there, that is 90 miles of pipe. That's all Alcosan owns. The other 4,000 or so miles of pipe that are in that service territory is either owned by the city or a borough or some type of water authority, such as the PWSA in the instance of the city of Pittsburgh. Next slide. This gives you a little better idea of what I'm talking about. Everything you see on the far right in the yellow is what we're responsible for as homeowners. Those are your downspouts that come off your roof, your lateral that goes into the street, those types of things. The orange infrastructure in the middle is what's owned by the municipality or the municipal authority. So if you have a backup in your basement, say, you wouldn't call Alcosan, you would call whoever you pay your water bill to more than likely, because they are the owners and the responsible party for that infrastructure. Stuff on the far left in the blue is what I was talking about. Those are the big pipes that we own currently. It takes all of the flows from all the municipalities. We have 3 big interceptors that move all of that flow into the Alcosan plant for treatment. Next slide, please. So the problem we have with all of that infrastructure that we were just talking about, it's undersized for the type of storms that we're getting right now. We estimate somewhere around 9 billion gallons of overflows happen a year. An overflow is when our system is completely full. We use big rainstorm comes, it fills the entire system up. Instead of being able to take that into the plant for treatment, we have to push it out into the rivers and streams in our area. That's diluted sewage that goes in there. That's something that our regulators have said that you can't do anymore. And frankly, it's the right thing to do to stop these. Next slide. So to solve this problem, at least solve a vast majority of it, Alcosan has come up with the Clean Water Plan. Many of you may have heard of this before. It was approved in 2020. Basically, what this is our blueprint for removing 7 billion gallons of that overflow volume that we estimate happens every year. That's a significant number and a significant improvement in the water quality of our rivers. It's a $2 billion investment. It is a huge, I cannot stress this enough. It is one of the biggest infrastructure projects that's going to be going on over the next 15 or so years in Allegheny County. All of these things we're going to talk about tonight have to be completed by 2036. And let me reiterate that just a little bit, because this plan is part of the consent decree. And I think a lot of people are not aware of that. That consent decree is a federal decree that requires Alcosan to do these projects and to make sure that this water quality improvement happens. If we do not meet these, then we are fined significantly by these regulators, which again, being ratepayer funded, is all going to come out of our pockets. Next slide, please. So the Clean Water Plan, 4 components. We won't spend much time on the first 3. Plant expansion is going on right now in earnest. The plant has probably not looked like it does right now since it was built in the 40s and the 50s. There's cranes everywhere, there's trucks everywhere. When it's all said and done, what this will allow us to do is treat more of that stormwater. That water that's now getting pushed out into the rivers, we will be able to take to the plant, treat, and then put back into the river. Second piece of that is regionalization. That goes back to the 90 miles of pipe that Alcosan currently owns. We have a very fractured system. It's unusual for this to be kind of this way, but we're working with municipal partners to take over some of those larger sewers. And when we take those over, we take over the maintenance, all of the work that needs to be done on them, the O&M. So it makes it more of a regional system, and it takes a lot of burden off of some of those municipalities. Third piece is the GROW, the source control projects that many of you have probably heard about. This is our grant program for the municipalities to do projects that basically just keep water out of the system. Rainwater that seeps in from a leaky pipe can be lined, and that's a source control project because it's keeping that water out of the system. It doesn't need to be brought to the plant for treatment. Rain gardens, green infrastructure, we all know about that. A very successful project. We're going into our 8th cycle, and I think now it's 141 projects or 44 projects, I forget. And lastly, but certainly not least, the regional tunnel system. This is going to be kind of the second big infrastructure project that people are going to going to hear about. And we'll get into a little bit of that in just a second. Next slide, please. So this is the tunnel system. This is the regional tunnel system that I was just referencing. These tunnels are 15 to 18 feet in diameter, so they are quite large. They will be at a minimum of 150 feet deep. So while these are being constructed, most, if not everybody, will not know anything is going on because we will be so deep. It's going to be built in 3 components. Pardon me, the green line is the Ohio River Tunnel. That's what we are getting closest to now, starting. We'll start that in 2025, which is really not that very far away. Second is the blue line. That's the Allegheny River Tunnel. That will probably be next. And then the last piece is the the Monongahela River Tunnel, which is the orange line that you see. And it starts about at Sandcastle and then runs over to where the other 2 tunnels intersect there on the north side. Next slide, please. So we want to bring this up, and that's part of the reason we're here, to show you the alignment right now for the Monongahela Tunnel will go underneath the Hill District. There's a couple of reasons for that. We have to build this infrastructure, this new infrastructure, these tunnels. They have to be built near our existing infrastructure. If we don't, we're not able to stop these overflows as efficiently, both on a financial level as well as an engineering level. So the alignment is very much driven by what was put into the ground in the 1940s, late 50s, when Alcosan came into existence. In the Hill District, there will be no surface construction. So, and I'll show you a slide in that in a second, but surface construction is what people would notice. Those are drop shafts, those are access tunnels, those are regulators that we're going to be building into the system. Those will be active construction sites for different parts of building the tunnel. The tunnel itself, again, and I can't reiterate this enough, is at least 150 feet deep. So the chances of anyone even knowing that that machine is coming underneath you is almost nil. Actually, in the hill, we're estimating that we're going to be about 300 to 400 feet deep just because of the topography. Next slide, please, ma'am. There it goes. So this is kind of explaining what we're doing. This is what's in the ground right now. The deep tunnels, the existing regulator, and then the combined sewer system that feeds into our system, which is what City of Pittsburgh has. What happens during these overflows, during the heavy rainstorms, is that deep interceptor gets filled up. It backs up to the regulator. The regulator knows it can't send that to the plant for treatment, so it pushes it out into the river. Next slide, please. So the new infrastructure, new regulators, the new drop shafts, some consolidation, connector tunnels, and then the deep tunnels that we were just talking about. What this does, and you see it's built very near our existing infrastructure. What this does is that regulator will now move those heavy flows down that drop shaft, which pretty much slows the flow down as well. Then from there, it flows into the new tunnels. From that point, it'll move directly to the plant for treatment. So it's keeping all of that water from going into the rivers, frankly. And again, this is sewage. This is diluted sewage that comes out of these outfalls. All of this is built in bedrock, which is another reason for the alignment. There's a geotech component to making sure that as we're boring through something that's going to be strong enough to hold and build this type of infrastructure. Next slide, please. So this is actually two tunnels. One on the left from Oregon, the other one on the right is from the UK, but this is very similar to what we're going to have at the end of the process. These are built by a tunnel boring machine, much like they used for the North Shore Connector. So once it goes down, once the tunnel boring machine goes down to start this tunnel, it never comes up until it's at the end of that tunnel route. Next slide, please. This is our construction schedule. I think it's important to note, you see where we are right now. We're getting towards the middle of the design for the Ohio River Tunnel project. We have to start construction in 2025. But if you notice, as soon as construction starts, we move into the design phase of the Allegheny River Tunnel project. Same thing with the Monongahela River Tunnel project. For the Mon Tunnel project, you're not looking at construction starting until 2030. So we're a long ways out. We're a long ways out even from the final design of that leg of the tunnel. Next slide, please. So I do ask that you guys follow along. I know this stuff is hard to digest, and no pun intended, but it really is. It's a lot of information, and a lot of people don't think about the larger sewer infrastructure that we have to have in this area. So please follow us along on our website or in social media. We do have newsletters. We're going to start using social media a lot more as construction starts, obviously, for alerts and those types of things. So I thank you guys. I think there's one more slide, maybe. Okay, well, thank you. Again, I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions as best I can.
We do have a question in the chat. I apologize if I mispronounced your name, Naomi. The question is the timeline for the the tunnel
That tunnel.
projected based on the existing surface construction scheduled in the lower hill, Monongahela? Yeah.
I'm sorry, repeat the question. Is it based upon?
Is it based on the existing surface construction scheduled in the lower hill?
No, because we will be so deep, it will not affect it whatsoever. Any construction that's going on the surface will not be affected by what we're doing.
Did anyone else want to take themselves off mute and ask any questions?
I do want to mention that at some point, again, we're a long way off from the Mon Tunnel. The only thing that anybody living in the hill or working in the hill might notice, we've been doing core borings. We're doing them right now on some of the trails here on the north side, and doing some around the casino as well. These are very small drilling rigs that come in. You drill about a 4-inch hole. This one would be obviously quite deep, but what it's doing, it's taking a core sample from deep underground to make sure that where we're planning to go is still in bedrock. As I said earlier, we still have a good solid base which to build this infrastructure.
Thank you, John. Thank you for presenting this information today. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat, and then we can make sure that those questions get answered. But thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Have a great evening. Next up, we're going to have Bedford Dwellings Choice Neighborhood Update.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexis Narodsky. I work for the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh. I'm a development manager. I believe the Director of Planning and Development, JW Kim from the Housing Authority, is also on the call, as well as a few partners from Trek Development Group. So I'll just go ahead and get started. The next slide. So I just wanted to familiarize everybody for those who might not know what Choice Neighborhoods is. Choice Neighborhoods is a federal grant program which is administered by HUD, and the program provides funding to transform neighborhoods, and it's focused on 3 main areas, which include housing, people, and neighborhood. So HACP intends to submit a Choice Neighborhoods implementation grant for $50 million at the beginning of 2023. The target public housing site is Bedford Dwellings. As you can see, that's the boundary for the target neighborhood, which is basically the Middle Hill and the Lower Hill. And then the grant due date is January 11, 2023. Sorry, I don't know why this slide got a little distorted, but this is the basic structure of the grant. So there are 2 lead grantees, which is the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh and the City of Pittsburgh. And then within that, we have the Housing Implementation Entity, which consists of an instrumentality of HACP called Allies and Ross Management Development Corporation, and then Trek Development Group. We have the Neighborhood Implementation Entity, which is the URA, and then the People Implementation Entity, which is Allegheny County Department of Human Services. Some basic housing information before we go into the proposed sites. We are planning for replacement of the entire Bedford Dwellings, which includes 411 units of housing. In addition, we also have more market rate and affordable housing. It will be 1-for-1 replacement. There are sites at Bedford Dwellings and within the Choice Neighborhoods boundary. And we are hoping to employ a build first, move once approach. And that's very important because we know that relocation can be a very stressful event for residents. So moving to their replacement unit instead of having to move in the interim temporarily is very important for our residents. This is the overall site plan as it currently stands for the housing plan. And then I think, Shavesha, if you click, I don't know if it translated, but it should have the phases for each one of them. It might, okay, yeah, cool. So phase 1 is Reed Roberts, which is located kind of behind the old Shop and Save, currently Salem's or to be Salem's. In addition, we also have partnered with Midpoint group of companies for offering about 40 replacement units at City's Edge. Both of those will be available around the same time, end of 2024, early 2025. So I think if you click again, we'll see where phase 1B is. And then after that, we move over to phase 2, which is on Francis Street. And then phase 3 would be Summers Street. And so this whole time, we're trying to keep residents on site for as long as possible, and then they only move once. Phase 4 is currently proposed as Heron Avenue. And then phase 5 would be what we call Chauncey East. And then phase 6 would be Chauncey West. So this is, it's a long process, not as long as Alcosan's timeline, but until 2030, we would be building units, mixed income housing. We do, as you can see, have about 49% of the units are replacement units. And then we have additional affordable units, probably at a little bit of a higher income. And then finally, we have market rate at about 25%. The numbers may fluctuate slightly as we get down into each phase, some of the ending phases, but overall, this is the housing plan that we're submitting, that we intend to submit to HUD. So this is just a view of Reed Roberts, which is the phase 1. It's the furthest along. We actually submitted tax credits for this in June, and we're hoping to hear back from PHFA soon on this item. And then this is just a bird's eye schematic view of what we're thinking for the current Bedford dwelling site. It includes Francis Street, which is currently vacant, and that's very important to residents. This is the current proposed housing and commercial on Heron Avenue. So that was just a brief update on the housing plan as it stands. For the neighborhood information. For people that might not be familiar, there's 3 components for the neighborhood strategy. They include economic development, place making is what HUD calls it. I know that the community prefers placekeeping, and then public safety. To assist in those strategies, HUD has what we call critical community improvement projects. And there are projects undertaken through the Choice Grant that help with the outcomes in the proposed transformation plan. So we have 4 CCIs, and Shivesh, I think you go to the next slide. We have 4 critical community improvements that we're proposing as part of the Choice Plan. The first one is to assist existing homeowners with facade improvements. This was really successful at the Larimer Choice Initiative. We want to duplicate it for the Hill District. Another critical community improvement project is commercial and street front activation along Heron and Center Avenues. We know that these were obviously very lively commercial corridors. So we want to continue trying to revitalize those corridors and make sure that they have commercial and street front activation. The other 2 that we have are the creation of new homeownership opportunities. And the final one is this proposed trail behind Bedford Dwellings. We're calling it the Coal Seam Trail right now. That's probably subject to change in line with the Hill District Green Plan that I think was done in 2010 or 2011. A placekeeping initiative that we know HUD really likes to see these types of activities occurring. And then if you can recall my first slide, the third component is people. The people strategy focuses on 3 main items: education, employment, and health. It's worth noting that the people plan is really for the residents of Bedford Dwellings. So those residents will have access to case management services. Those case management services will be provided by Macedonia Face and Neighborhood Resilience Project. Those are 2 trusted providers by our residents already in the Hill District. They will be providing the case management services for the Bedford Dwellings residents during the CNI grant period. Some additional people plan strategies that I just wanted to highlight. A big one that we've been discussing is a trauma-informed approach. We know that there are some public safety issues and violence issues at Bedford Dwellings. So all staff working on the people plan will be provided training and trauma-informed care to hopefully promote a culture of safety, healing, and empowerment. Additionally, we plan to have liaisons focusing on education, health, and employment. These liaisons kind of act as a subject matter expert in each of the things that are very complex. Our residents get the services that they need. We use this model in Larimer, and we found that it was really helpful.
You're breaking up really, really bad. I don't know if he's still with us.
Sorry, can you guys still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. How much of that did you guys get? Not
You
much.
can start from the liaison strategy. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so for the liaison strategy, basically, we have people who are subject matter experts who assist on each of the 3 key categories of education, employment, and health. And they help the case managers navigate these complex systems. We had this in the Larimer Choice, and we found it was really successful in getting results. So that's why we have it. And then just one final thing, please always feel free to visit our website at bedfordconnect.com. We will be having some more community engagement, so we look forward to hearing from everybody.
Thank you. Did anyone have any questions or wanted to take themselves off mute to ask any questions? If not, I'd like to go to the next presenter. And so we have the Hill District Parks Master Plan.
All right. Hi, I'm Marty Battistone. I am one of the environmental planners with the city's Department of City Planning. So actually not the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy, but we are working alongside them. They're very involved. So I'll just be doing kind of a quick update. Apologies, my Adobe wasn't working, so I wasn't able to pull some of the slides that aren't relevant. So we'll just kind of breeze through it like these. These are from our meeting. But basically we had a handful of meetings with the advisory committee. We did a fair amount of, attending public meetings like Nafasian Center and the Health and Wellness Day, a couple meetings at Ammon. And really this is a planning effort, trying to build on the green print for the entire neighborhood, the park system. So really looking at the whole neighborhood as a system, but then also focusing a fair amount on Kennard as well. So we can go next slide. So just as an overview, these are all the spaces that are, considered in the planning effort. Not all of them are going to necessarily have, so all the ones in blue, outlined in blue, I know it's hard to see, but those are all the ones that are like officially a part of the planning process. And then the ones in green, like the Peterson Sports Complex and some of those other spaces are just more that we're aware of it and we're sort of taking it into consideration. And then, just kind of thinking about how all these spaces can support each other. Next slide. So thinking about, all the outreach that we did and individual stakeholder interviews, these were a lot of our main takeaways. Just an amazing legacy of Black athletic excellence. So many people shared stories of like the basketball games at Kennard, and that was like, the place to be. And that, as we know, I'm sure like so many of us on this call, there's so much planning and we've not seen enough be implemented. So I think for a lot of people, it's they want to see improvements in the park. And not to say they don't care what those improvements are, but just that, we sort of know what the highest needs are and they want to see it done. Restrooms are obviously a big thing that people want, especially at Kennard. And then increased accessibility. We know that for those who are less physically able, or even, people with strollers, that it's really hard not only to navigate inside the parks, but to get to and from them as well. So thinking about how we can make spaces more accessible and then also create activities for every age. So having playgrounds for younger, having walking paths for, the older folks and just kind of everything in between. And just really building on so many of the things that a lot of the community partners are already doing. How can we really try and make sure that we're creating spaces to aid the programming that a lot of these groups and residents are doing on their own. And just that funding is obviously a big piece of it. And we don't want to have to rely so much on, the residents and volunteers to maintain these spaces. They're city parks and they should be maintained that way. Next slide. So we went through, and you can go to the next one. We did, we sort of distilled all that and thought about, well, what can we do in the physical space, to sort of help achieve some of those things. And so this really sort of breaks out what are the design recommendations that can help achieve a lot of what we heard. We also, we heard a lot about public art and technology in the parks, whether that's chargers, whether that's Wi-Fi. There's a lot of things, especially with the Hill District Rebels. Their team, we know there's a lot of needs at Kennard. Same with at Ammon, and a lot of those smaller parklets, like Robert E. Williams and those types of spaces. So we'll basically be doing design recommendations for every park. And that whether that includes just upgrading amenities that are already there, adding different amenities, changing the layout, things like that. So we'll be making these sort of recommendations for every park. Next slide. Yeah, so just, different things, walking trails, different types of sport courts, and different type of spaces to try and support the programming that we know people want to see. So whether that's having sort of open space for movies in the park, splash pads, things like that. So making, and we'll go through this, but making recommendations and phasing for each space. So if we go to the next slide, thinking about, what are the immediate needs? We, through meeting with a lot of the coaches, we know that the Rebels needed restrooms, additional restrooms. So we tried to get another porta-john out there. But then thinking about when we're making budget requests for implementing these, what's the first phase of things to make it more functional? Then thinking about how can we enhance it? And then the third phase being those details and those projects that really make something, really make a place a destination. So next slide. Yeah, so like I said, we'll be doing this sort of phasing for each space, but this is the one for Kennard, with the sort of immediate needs being the porta-johns and this, a sink hand washing station, repainting, repairing the things that are already there, such as adding a second field goal post for the football field. The bleachers were covered in weeds, same with the baseball field. So trying to address those things, and then making the budget asks to do design of these kind of phase one things. So improving the amenities that are there, upgrading the fields, the restrooms, the paths, and then in the second phase, trying to address some of those more details, like all the athletic storage equipment, some of the landscaping, artwork, things like that. And then in phase three, doing a parking lot and a splash pad, things like that. So this is what hopefully, it'll look like for every space in the Hill District. For every park, we'll have this sort of phased recommendation that will help guide our budget requests moving forward. So yeah, we can skip that. We're not breaking out. And then basically we'll do the same for programming, but I think this is a little different just because there's so many organizations in the community that are already doing this work. And so really trying to highlight that, and again, provide the amenities that can help support this. So we can sort of breeze through those, but really we're going to be, right now we're doing the details of the recommendations for all the parks. And then once we have that, we'll be going back out and doing, pop-ups in the community, trying to do, sort of office hours at like the YMCA and places that we know people are going, to really get a sense for what people want to see at which park. So yeah, there's a lot of recommendations, like, promoting kind of the legacy, the commercial legacy of Center Avenue, and, a lot of these things that focus on the arts and culture of the Hill District. Maintenance, and trying, to work with the groups that are already doing so much. So yeah, that's where we're at. We're sort of in an in-between phase right now. Like I said, we're waiting to get all of the design details and recommendations figured out for each park space. But once we have that, we'll be doing a lot more engagement, kind of over the holidays, through the winter, and then into 2023. So we can, yeah. So if there is anyone that has thoughts about those, happy, would love to field that now. I know we're getting close, 6:55. So trying to go quickly. Yeah, please let me know if you have any questions or anything like that.
Thank you. Did anyone have any questions? Please take yourself off mute or drop them in the chat. If not, Marty, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we look forward to hearing from you in the future and see what's going on with the parks.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate all your participation today.
Yes, thank you so much. And so we have one more presentation for tonight, and that is on Community Leap. Trying to see if I see the presenter.
I'm here.
Oh, there you go. When you speak, you pop up. So
Yeah. So I am matching the last slide actually. Like my camera has been green for the past 6 months, so it was that's funny. And my accent is from France, if anybody's wondering what it is. I've been here for 15 years, so I consider myself a Pittsburgher now. So I'm from Marion. I'm an energy planner for the city of Pittsburgh. And if anybody is gonna jump off before I finish, the main takeaway is that if you have any anecdotal information or expertise on the undermines or any ideas on energy efficiency and clean energy, reach out to your RCOs or to myself to get involved in this project. So that the code is out there, so feel free to connect with me. So if you can go to the next slide. So this is the map of the communities that received the LEAP technical assistance. LEAP stands for Local Energy Action Program, and it's a pilot from the federal government. So there's 24 of us that are currently receiving this technical assistance. Next slide. So it's a technical assistance. So it's a little different from any like grant money. Like there's no money being brought to the city or to any organization yet. This is expertise being brought to us. And it's sponsored by the Department of Energy. So it's at the federal level. And it's a big push of the administration to try to support communities to take local action on energy. And the people coordinating is one of the national labs. It's called NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and they work in partnership with 2 other of those national labs. But what are those labs exactly? If you can go to the next slide, it's another map. I like map today. So national labs are 17 entities that are funded by the federal government, so with your taxes, to advance research on many different scientific topics. And there's some short-range projects where they help to commercialize maybe a new technology or new ideas coming from universities. There's longer range where they work on projects for 20 or 30 years when they think a technology is going to become something valuable for the country in the future. So it's somewhat of a more independent research environment because it's not like a private business pushing for something. So there's some neutrality and continuity that comes with those national labs. Next slide. So the one we're working is, like I said, the Renewable Energy Laboratory. It's about 3,000 people. It's a world-class facility. They have 900 partnerships, and they have a campus that's a living laboratory. So that means it's really cool. They test on themselves a little bit. So if they bring you a new like heating technology or a new like monitor or a new solar panel, they're going to put it on their building or inside their building, and the occupants of the building are going to be the one like providing feedback and seeing if the technology is really doing what they want or not. So it's a very nerdy place to work at. And if your kids or your nephews are into science, this is a great place to work because you get to really use your science knowledge to try to advance like projects and programs that can impact the entire country. So That's the place I wanted to go when I was younger. So the technical assistance is really centered on communities. So it was really the federal government trying to empower the communities to get the tools to be able to access the federal money. So, and this happened at the same time where we were doing the neighborhood master plan. And during the infrastructure action team, there was discussion that we needed more maps, more data, more analysis to really create a future for clean energy in the Hill. So we applied to this pilot, hoping to answer the question that were brought up during the action team. So it's centered on the goal and the question of the community and the local context. And then you're using the data and the tool and software from those national labs to get more information and create more scenarios of what can be, and then analyze that option for an energy future. Next slide. So the type of support they're providing is something like feasibility analysis, policy and programmatic analysis, installation cost analysis. They do models for different scenarios. They can provide guidance, and they can help with awareness and education. Next slide. So the application we put in was focused on the feedback we got in the action team, and it was to develop a residential housing retrofit strategy map. As you are all probably aware, we don't have a very good building stock in Pittsburgh. Our houses are old, they're leaky, and we have to spend a lot of money on energy bills like gas and electricity bills. And if we retrofit those houses, we can reduce the energy burden on people, which means we can help people pay less money on their utility bill. But we really need to scale that up to really have the entire community being able to feel this impact of reducing the burden on them. And then the second axis to this application was a clean energy roadmap. As you know, there's lots of vacant lots in the Hill, and there's also lots of undermine. There's old shafts, old tunnels. Some of them are flooding, some of them are not. We don't really know exactly what is going on in there. And what if we could use some of those shafts and turn them into assets like geothermal or anything else, instead of them being a liability for developments. So trying to get a roadmap on what of this site could be used for clean energy is also something that we wanted to explore with this expertise. This is just the beginning of the program. We're currently doing listening session with the national labs and the RCO. So that includes Shevesha from the CDC, the Hill Consensus Group, and the Hill Collaborative. And we're really trying to narrow down what are exactly the tool or the model or the needs from the community on those two topics to really advance the needs of the community. So if you care or if you're interested in energy efficiency and clean energy, please reach out to me and the RCOs so you can voice your ideas and thoughts on this type of project. Next slide. So what do we need help? What do we need? More models and more plans and more analysis? Like Marty just said, we do lots of planning, and it's hard. We want to see more action. Well, the reason we need technical assistance is if you want to access federal funds, because it's federal money and it's very, very defined how you can use it, you need to build very robust applications to get those federal funds. And to make your application more robust, you need more information, more data, a really defined scope and project, great partnerships. And those are very complicated and long process to go through. Like I circled here, this application is 100 pages. So just reading what they want is time consuming. So by working with one of the national labs, we can understand the federal government priorities better. They give us more data and more analysis that are lined up with their priorities. So it's giving us more chance to apply to federal grants in the future and get more funding to the Hill District to innovate on clean energy and help the residents in the community. And I have one more slide, I think. And in addition to those big federal funds that we could get to bring to the community, there is also recently the IRA was passed and there is money going directly to people's pockets. So I have you guys, I want to take the opportunity to flag that. At the beginning of next year, there's lots of rebates and tax credit coming for improving your attics, fixing some leaks, changing your electric wiring, changing your gas stove to an induction stove. There's lots of funding coming around. So if you have some home improvement to be done, there's chances that you can get some federal funds directly in your pocket to help you with that. And thank you. And if you go to the next slide, my email is there. Feel free to reach out if you have any question or ideas to share with me.
Thank you so much for presenting that information. And thank you for joining us. I'm just going to go over this last slide with everyone. And so thanks everyone, all the presenters for presenting tonight and providing the residents in the community with an update on the projects that are happening in the Hill District. Be sure to follow us to stay up to date on what's happening in the Hill District. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook at My Hill District. And so, yeah, make sure you sign up and also sign up for our email list at hilldistrict.org/sign up so you can stay up to date on what's happening in the community. And we hope to see you all at the next Hill District Plans meeting. Thank you all again for attending tonight. If you have any questions that come up later, feel free to email programs@hilldistrict.org and we'll be sure to get you answers. Thank you and have a nice night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.